Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So I was looking, I made the mistake of, I don't know if it was a mistake. I'm so interested in what's going on in the political circles and what's going on in the courts because, well, I run a podcast and I want to make sure people know what's going on for what viewers I do have. By the way, like, share, subscribe, and thank you for tuning in. So I listened to the oral arguments for Chevron deference cases today, for the two that are in the Supreme Court. And if you don't know what Chevron deference is, let me explain what that is. Chevron deference is any of the alphabet agencies, the EPA, the ATF, the FBI, making law themselves without going through Congress. It's a big component of what we have been fighting with the bump stock ban, the pistol brace rule, but the cases today specifically had to do with the EPA and the EPA overstepping their bounds, and just like the ATF has when it came to private fishing vessels, saying that they had to pay. Anyway, long story short, what ended up happening between the two is they gave their oral arguments, and it's about 3.5 hours long that I've listened to, and the guy that covered it is Guns and Gadgets. It's Jared from there. He's a pretty cool cat. I'd like to meet the guy. He's very big into 2A. He's also one of the big influencers in the 2A. But he live streamed it so we could hear it, and without having to go through the Congress or through the Supreme Court's website to try to watch it, because they have limited bandwidth stuff, and he posted it to YouTube. So what I got from it was generally both sides bickering and arguing, which is what they're supposed to do, because they're trying to prove their case at the beginning of the show, so to speak. So this case is Robondo, which is something we need to watch out for, because it's going to weigh heavily on other alphabet agencies. This is why we should be paying attention to it, because it has some repercussions with the 2A. Because if they find in favor of Robondo, in this case, that means that Chevron deference ends. And with Chevron deference ending, that opens the door for us to go right after the ATF at their throat against them trying to make unjust rules based off of some arbitrary decision that they make. And it was very enlightening, let's just put it that way, because both sides actually have some decent arguments to some degree. I'm not a litigator, I'm not a lawyer, but overall, because of the bias I have, I'd have to say, and it seemed pretty apparent that even the left side of the court, the ones appointed by other Democrat people, Democrat administrations, were actually asking some of the same questions I would ask. How does this impact, if we do this type of case, we rule in favor of this, and we throw this out, what does it do to the court? Okay. And one of the big questions that came up was about the ambiguity of Chevron deference, is that one of the key factors of Chevron deference is that these alphabet agencies have to open up for comment from the public. And Gorsuch brought up something Justice Gorsuch brought up something very much in our favor. What if they make a law or a rule and that becomes law, and no comment period was ever really entered, and they changed exactly what they were doing against what the comments were saying? So we're not getting our day in court, basically, is what he's bringing up. And that's what seems to happen with us in the 2A. We've made comments before, and the comments actually help. So when the stuff comes up for the ATF and they have it open for comment period, that's when you need to get in there and make your voice known. We've had an effect with the green tip 5.56 ammo. There was a point in time where Obama had wanted to ban that completely using the ATF. And the comment period overwhelmed the ATF to realize that this is a big issue, that they're not going to get past it. And what's happened with us is we've become complacent. And I think we're not commenting as much as we need to. Now, you need to be professional when you comment. You need to be courteous. You can't just call them jackasses because, well, you're trying to be as professional as you can be. Form letters are okay, but actual comments are better because they use algorithms and AI nowadays to figure out what's real and what's just regurgitated. And that's where your personalized comments come into play. If they see enough personalized comments, they realize that this is a bigger deal. They're going to have to go back and rethink what they're doing and reword it, rewrite it, and change what they're doing before they even attempt it again, and then they have to open it up for comment again. That's the process that we currently have that's going on and what we need to be more active in. So what's going to happen? Well, the case was entered into the docket, and it'll be heard on Thursday of next week. I'll give an update then as to what they're finding preliminary so far, and this could take forever. This is the opening salvo just to enter the case into the docket so that they can go on. Something I found in New Mexico Roundhouse legislative stuff that you may want to be aware of, because it could have some ramifications in the 2A, but it has more ramifications in the political spaces. And since this is guns and news and politics, this podcast is dedicated to that. You may want to look out for what they're trying to do with the primary elections. So with what they're doing in the Roundhouse, and it's a Senate bill, it's Senate Bill 38. What they're trying to do is remove the party affiliation necessity for you to vote, meaning that anybody, independents, anyone can come in on the day of a primary and pick the candidate of a major political party. Now, why does this have repercussions? Well, for independents, it allows them to vote in the primary, which is a good thing, in my opinion. The bad part of it is that you can have people deny their political party, go against their political party, to vote for the worst candidate possible for the opposing party. Example, if we, in our primary, if this passes, it would probably go into effect, and it would happen in our June primary that they would change this, and we would have this law in effect. Between the three Republican candidates that you could see possibly being there right now would be Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis. Okay. With this policy, they could actually go have a ton of Democrats come in, negate because they're not going to have a Democratic Party primary. It's only going to be a Republican Party primary because they already have their candidate, which is Joe Biden. They could come in and vote for Nikki Haley and give New Mexico's votes to Nikki Haley for the primary. And as hot and contested in some of these races could be, there could be an issue there. Now, do I see this being an overwhelming issue in this particular primary when it comes to the president? No. I am pretty sure that Trump's going to lock this in no matter what. These other candidates aren't polling high enough that I've seen even in New Hampshire. In fact, they're talking about Nikki Haley and DeSantis possibly leaving after the New Hampshire primary. But for the smaller races, this could be a problem. When you have bigger cities like Albuquerque or Santa Fe or Las Cruces that are looking at our opposition, our key races, our key Senate races for the state, and they have the chance to pick the worst candidate for us on the right or those of us in the Republican. I'm still a registered Republican even though I'm a Libertarian. That's because I do want to vote in the primaries. And I still can, but I can only vote for Libertarians. And so far in the Libertarian spaces, I've not seen anyone that's worth garnering a vote so that they actually have a chance at the state races, let alone a national race, because there's too much infighting in the Libertarian Party. The one thing you'll notice if you ever went to a Libertarian caucus or you actually talked to enough Libertarians, you realize that they hate each other. There's no unity there. And in something as critical as what's happening in our national spaces right now, there needs to be some cohesiveness, at least party-wise, to some degree, to get stuff done in our favor, specifically in the 2A, but also in our civil rights. The Democratic Party, which used to be very anti-war, very pro-rights, seems to be very anti all of that now. There are for pro-censorship, where the Republican Party isn't so much anymore. Nikki Haley is. But they're also for abortion rights, and whether you lie on the abortion thing, that's between you and God. I personally have mentioned myself, I don't believe in it. My right ended, though, when I didn't wrap up and make the decision to take care of the kid, period. Okay, that's what most men of character need to start thinking about when they are thinking long-term of what they're doing. They need to think more long-term, because the short-term thinking that we're seeing in the American populace is the reason why we're fighting the battles we're fighting. The other thing I saw in the Roundhouse update that is of concern is now there's a bill in the House and in the Senate, so it means there's definitely going to be hearing on it, about gross receipt tax increases for firearms and firearm ammunition. Now, what they're trying to do is, I've told you that they're going to use those funds to help families that have been hit by crime. That sounds great on paper. What it actually is going to be used is how they've done it in other states. They're going to use this to make it so prohibitively expensive that you can't have your 2A rights. Basically, if they make ammunition, put a 35 or a 45% excise tax on it, could you imagine your ammunition prices going up 50% with inflation, and you're kind of barely making ends meet right now? Okay, that's the type of thing we need to think about. Same thing for firearms, if they give it a 500% increase. That's what they're putting the language and the bedrock in for right now that we need to be very careful for and need to oppose. Because if we don't oppose it now, we'll have to face the repercussions later. And we cannot let those 3 big cities determine what's going to happen in our little state. We need to be very cognizant, very vocal, and make it as painful as possible. Because the other things I can tell you is you're seeing a lot of finance bills trying to go through. Fund this. They're wanting to expand the Del Norte Pass in Albuquerque. So, what that means is, like I said before, they're going to be focused on the budget more than anything else during this session. Be ready for a special session, because the governor probably isn't going to get everything she wants, either financially or in that public safety space that she's deemed this as an issue with. Some interesting things else to see in the Roundhouse is they're wanting to bring the death penalty back. Now, with the rate that crime has increased in New Mexico, specifically violent crime, I can see this being a deterrent, but at the same time, I've had a realization a long time ago that I don't necessarily believe that anyone, whether it's federal or the state, has the right to determine someone's death. And what I mean by that is you look at how much the government itself, whether it's federal or the state government, has gotten wrong in the last 3 years, and you want to put someone's life on the line to make them determine if they're going to die. That's where I have a problem, because this person may very well deserve death, but the fact that the government cannot figure out its own issues, and you're going to put this person's life, right or wrong, in their hands, this is where I have a hard problem. I have a hard fight. There's also bills that are running through the Roundhouse that are trying to repeal things like the unlimited abortion stuff. There's also stuff you need to be very cognizant of where they're trying to push no book banning in public libraries. I'm kind of for that because I'm a free speech absolutist, but I do believe that if the language is manipulated enough, that's going to extend to school libraries. And with public schools being a thing and being the primary vehicle for education in the United States and in New Mexico specifically, I do have a problem with some of these books that are of a very pornographic nature being handed to kids. And that's something that has been shown around, and people have said, no, it's not a thing, until you actually see the book and you actually look at it and realize that they're talking about sexual acts for a minor. And that should be something that should be dealt with at the parent, or at the very least at an age-appropriate level. And if you say these books aren't real and they're not there, I can tell you, having worked in K-12 schools and finding these books on teachers' desks before this became a big stink, I'd done that. I've seen it. I've seen it specifically at the high school in Aztec, New Mexico. Now, is it prevalent? I'm not sure. I only saw it once or twice in 2 different places, and it could have been that they were passing the book back and forth, and I don't know what the discussion was that they had. Maybe they were having the discussion of the mindset that I have, and I'm kind of inclined to believe that because Aztec is very conservative. Even with the stuff that's going on nowadays with public education becoming more of an entity that we're not in line with as a public, they're still very beholden to, a lot of school districts are very beholden to the public. And the only way parents make any changes happen in public school districts is with parent involvement. And whether you think it's not a thing or not, you need to go talk to your school board. You need to talk to your superintendent. You need to be there at those board meetings if you have kids enrolled in public school, because then you have a voice. And believe it or not, it matters. I can tell you that from experience. So that's the main things I was going to say that I've seen today that have been ongoing. There's some debate right now whether the National Supreme Court, is actually going to take on an AR-15 case, a ban case from California. The Ninth Circuit Court has had, which is in California, which has had some issues with trying to keep their gun ban, and they're losing consistently in court, and the case keeps getting bounced back and forth, so there's some ambiguity there that needs to be addressed by a higher court. So there is a potential that it gets to the Supreme Court. That's a good thing for us, because then for once and for all, we can finally put this to bed, because they're not going to be able to find, using the Heller or the Bruin decision, they're not going to be able to use the grounds that these are modern guns that have to be banned based on the deadliness of them, because they're not overly deadly from what our founding fathers had. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.